Hi everyone, today we're starting neuroanatomy. So first of all, talking about the nervous system, it is divided into central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system is concerned with brain and spinal cord, whereas your peripheral nervous system, it has two components. One is sensory and the other is motor. So when you talk about the sensory peripheral nervous system, it has general senses and special senses. And when you talk about motor, it has a somatic motor response and autonomic motor responses. So this is like a clear division, right? So nervous system, central nervous system, and peripheral nervous system. When we talk about peripheral nervous system, that's divided into sensory and motor. And then sensory is divided into general senses and special senses, and your motor is divided into somatic and autonomic. When you talk about special and general senses, the special senses are those senses which can only be sensed by a particular organ. For example, the sense of vision or the sight, right? You cannot see with any organ of your body other than eyes, right? So that's a special sense which can only be sensed with the help of a specific part of your body. For example, eyes can only eyes can sense this idea. That's the right way to phrase it. That only organ that can see are the eyes, and only organ that can hear are the ears. So hearing you cannot do with any other part of your body except for the ears. And now general senses, in that all the other senses come. For example, touch. Now you can touch with the help of your finger, you can also touch with the help of your foot, you can also touch with the help of your tongue, right? But you can only taste with the tongue, right? So taste is a special sense, but touch is a general sense, right? I hope that's now clear. Now general senses are further divided into somatic and visual. Somatic are those senses which are coming from some superficial part of your body, and visceral are those which are coming from some deeper organs of your body, some visceral organs of your body. For example, if you have any sense in your stomach, right? So that will be a visceral sense, but that classifies in general senses. So we're done with special and general senses, which are components of sensory. When you talk about motor, you have somatic and autonomic. Now, autonomic, we all know we have sympathetic and parasympathetic. Sympathetic is under fight and flight, and parasympathetic is under rest and digest, right? Now, somatic are under your voluntary control. For example, all the skeletal muscles, they are under your voluntary control, so that's somatic. Autonomic are under your involuntary control. For example, the cardiac muscles, the smooth muscles, the glandular tissues, so even the secretory activity, so all of that is under your involuntary control. Cardiac muscles, smooth muscles, and the glandular tissues. So autonomic is that. And then autonomic is further divided into sympathetic and parasympathetic. So motor is somatic and autonomic. So somatic is everything that's under your conscious control. Autonomic, everything that's under your involuntary control. Right, for example, everything done by your smooth muscles, by your cardiac muscles, and by your glandular tissue. And somatic is by your skeletal tissues or skeletal muscles, right? And autonomic is divided into sympathetic and parasympathetic, right? Now, talking about a very important sense, which is proprioception. Now, all sensations that come from locomotor system, they are basically proprioception. So, this is the definition that you need to know word by word. That every sense that comes from locomotor system is the proprioception. It's the sense of proprioception. What is exactly this? This is basically the sense of position. For example, if I ask you to close your eyes and scratch your ear, you'll ultimately be able to do it because you know what's the position of your ear. You will be also knowing about the position of your hand in space, and then you're going to take it to your ear and scratch your ear with eyes closed. So that's done. So this is because of the proprioception. The other is, for example, if you're walking, you won't lift both of your foot off the ground, right? You're not going to lift both of your feet off the ground, right? So you're going to take one step while the other one will be on the ground, and then you're going to lift the other foot and the other one will be on the ground. So both you're not going to take simultaneously off the ground, otherwise you'll fall down. This is also thanks to the sense of position, which is proprioception. Now, there are some diseases that are going to disturb proprioception, and then a person won't be able to walk well, and that person or that patient, he won't have coordinated movements, right? For example, if you make the person stand up and you tell him that, okay, lift both of your arms, like make them parallel to the ground, right? Raise your arms parallel to the ground, he will not be able to do it because there's some sort of disturbance in his proprioception. He has some sort of disease that is disrupting his proprioception, right? Now, yeah, so that's about it. Now, a very important question that arises here. Before that, let me show you this diagram. You should be familiar with this diagram and it should be in your fingertips. This is your brainstem, which comprises of midbrain, pons, and medulla. And this is your cerebellum behind your pons and medulla. This is your hindbrain, right? And this is your brainstem. Now, hindbrain is also known as rhombencephalon, right? It consists of these three components I've already mentioned. Then midbrain is also known as mesencephalon, and then this is your forebrain. Forebrain is also known as prosencephalon. It is further divided into diencephalon and telencephalon. By telencephalon and diencephalon, so you should know that this princess in the middle. This is diencephalon, and then all the telescopes from the side, paparazzi is trying to capture her. So telencephalon is the cerebral cortex, and diencephalon is the main matter which is sitting right in the middle. Right. So this is your cerebral cortex. So this is the image. Now, one question that arises is any sort of information that is going to go to your conscious level, who is going to take that out? Very important. The cerebral cortex is going to take up all the information that's going to your conscious level. And if there's any information regarding your right, so this is about it. So conscious level and unconscious level. So any information, for example, your peristalsis, your blood pressure regulation, you don't need to know about it consciously. For example, right now you're sitting, your mind won't be directed at the angle you're sitting, or what are the parts of the body which are in contact with the chair right now, what are the bones that you're feeling. No, that's not of your concern for now, right? So that's under your unconscious level. That information is going to your unconscious level, the peristalsis that's happening right now in your stomach, or your in your intestines because of the food digestion, or the blood pressure regulations, the vessels that are going under vasoconstriction or vasodilation. That's all under your unconscious control, right? And every information that's concerning you right now, for example, you're talking, so you're very conscious about what you're saying and is it appropriate or not. That is going and coming from your cerebral cortex. Now, very important, when you talk about central nervous system, there are two types of cells that you need to be aware of: neurons and neuroglial. And not just central nervous system, but also your peripheral nervous system. So in uh, general, your nervous system. So when you're talking about nervous system, there are two very important cells: neurons and neuroglial cells. Now, neurons are those cells which conduct information. These are the true nervous system cells, or true central nervous system cells. What they do, they take action potential from one point and they take it to the other point. So basically, the function of neurons is, if let's say this is a cell body and this is a neuron, these are the dendrites and this is an axon. So it's going to take information from this point to this point, right? Cell body to axons. So the function of neurons is to take action potential from one place to another. Whereas neuroglial cells, these are the sporting cells, or you can also call them connective tissue cells of the nervous system. These have a lot of sporting role, and there's so many neuroglial cells. We'll talk about them in detail in some other video. But for now, you should know these are the sporting cells. They can provide insulation in the form of oligodendrocytes in central nervous system, Schwann cells in peripheral nervous systems, and you have astrocytes, and you have so many more ependymal cells, right? So gray matter and white matter, let's talk about them now. Gray matter is a collection of cell bodies, and what is white matter? It's a collection of nerve fibers, the axons. White matter is a collection of nerve fibers, axon. Why does it appear white? Because it is myelinated. So the Schwann cells that myelinate, or the oligodendrocytes that myelinate the axons, they appear white in color, right? So, but when you talk about gray matter and white matter, we're not talking about it. So right now, I've given you the definition, but this definition is incomplete. Why? Because I didn't mention very important component, which is central nervous system. So gray matter is a collection of cell bodies in the central nervous system, whereas white matter is a collection of nerve fibers or axons in the central nervous system. We're not talking about the peripheral nervous systems, right? So gray matter and white matters only exist in your central nervous system, in your brain and in your spinal cord. If you talk about your brain, the gray matter is the outer, right? So outer you have the gray matter, and inside you have inner. Like for example, if this is your brain, right? So outer is going to be the gray matter, inside you'll have white matter. If you talk about the spinal cord, so you have, oh my god, pathetic. If you're talking about the spinal cord, why cannot I draw a spinal cord? So when you're talking about a spinal cord, you have inner gray matter and outer white matter. When you talk about brain, you have outer gray and inner white, right? So this is your gray and white matter, which is collection of cell bodies in central nervous system and collection of nerve fibers or axons in the central nervous system. Now gray matter is further divided into cortex and nucleus. Cortex is this, the one on the surface. This is your cortex. So cortex is also a part of gray matter only. The gray matter which is on the surface, that's called cortex, and the gray matter that's embedded in the white matter, that's called nuclei or nucleus. This is the gray matter which is embedded in the white matter in the middle. So brain outer is the gray matter, right? So gray matter on the surface, that's the cortex. Gray matter which is embedded in the white matter, that's the nucleus, right? For example, the basal nuclei, these are gray matter structures which are embedded in white matter. Cerebral cortex, that's a collection of cell bodies, gray matter on the surface. So cerebral cortex, if anyone questions you what is cortex, cortex, it should click in your mind that this is gray matter. What is gray matter? It's a bundle of cell bodies and cell bodies in the central nervous system, and cortex on surface. I hope that makes sense. Basal nuclei or nuclei, these are pieces of gray matter which are embedded in the white matter. This is cerebellar cortex. Again, it's gray matter. Cortex means gray matter, therefore it's in the central nervous system. And gray matter is the collection of cell bodies, in your central nervous system. This is collection of cell bodies which are on the surface. So that's cerebral cortex. If it was embedded in white matter, it would be nuclei. And this is the white matter you can see. Now, for now, you might not be understanding what are these white matters. These are basically tracts, and tracts are made up of white matter, the axons, right? This entire lecture is about ascending and descending tracts. For now, we'll focus on ascending tracts first in this video, but the fact being that white matter are tracts. You'll understand in a minute. Yes, exactly. Here, white matter. Now, white matter, I told you they are basically your collection of axons, right? Collection of axons or the processes, right? And now there are different dimensions in which these nerve fibers or axons are going, or this white matter is going. It can either go cephalocaudally, right? Cephalocaudally it can go, or it can go anteroposteriorly from anterior to the posterior, for example, from your frontal to the occipital lobe, or it can go from the right to the left, from right cerebral hemisphere to the left. So right and left, cephalocaudally or anteroposteriorly. Right? If this white matter is going cephalocaudally, it is known as tracts, ascending and descending tracts, because they're going cephalocaudally, ascending and descending tracts. If it's going right and left, connecting the right cerebral hemisphere to the left cerebral hemisphere, we'll have commissures. And if it's going antero-posteriorly from occipital to frontal, frontal lobe in the front to the occipital lobe at the back, anterior posteriorly from anterior to the posterior end, it's known as association fibers. So that these are three types of white matters: tracts, commissures, and association fibers. So now you need to be clear that if anyone is talking about white matter, but if anyone is, for a matter of fact, talking about association fibers, commissures, or tracts, you should know these are white matter. So again, tracts are going cephalocaudally, commissures are going from right to left, but they're white matter, and association fibers, they're going anteroposteriorly, but these are also white matters. Now moving forward, now sensory fibers and motor fibers that cross over in brainstem. This is some extra information, but let's just go over it. Sensory fibers and motor fibers cross over in brainstem. Therefore, gray matter will break down in small pieces, fragments. That area becomes network of gray and white matter, reticular formation. So right now we're talking about reticular formation, but this will be clarified further um, in the upcoming minutes, because we're going to talk about reticular formation with regards to your a diffuse pain sensation. So basically this is a diffuse network of nerve pathways in the brainstem connecting the spinal cord, cerebrum, cerebellum, and mediating the overall level of consciousness. Very important. Consciousness. Reticular formation is concerned with bringing the consciousness, because this acts as a switch. What does it act as? A switch of your cerebral cortex. So it decides whether to turn on or off your cerebral cortex and whether to bring a person into consciousness or not. So that's the function of the reticular formation. The other function is also the pain. The slow pain fibers terminate in some of the slow pain fibers terminate in the reticular formation, so you can feel the slow, throbbing, nauseous, burning pain, right? That's also because of reticular formation. And another main function is that it brings the level of consciousness because it turns on and off the cerebral cortex. Now, exactly where is it situated? You're in the brainstem, in your midbrain, pons, and medulla. Midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. This is your brainstem. So here, in this entire region, you will see this reticular formation. In this entire region, you will see like this. This is your reticular formation. Now, what happens exactly that sensory fibers and motor fibers, they're going to cross over in your brainstem, and the gray matter, it will break down in small pieces. That area becomes network of gray and white matter, reticular formation. So reticular formation is basically a gray matter and white matter network where there's all everything, basically fragments of gray matter as well as white matter. Now, if you remember the transverse cross sections of midbrain, pons, and medulla, everywhere you're going to see reticular formation. So it's all over your brainstem. But now you know it brings the conscious level on and off switch of cerebral cortex, and it also brings the pain, slow pain impulses. Now, a deeper part of the brainstem where major sensory and motor crossings of white-gray matter occurs. This is a deeper part of brainstem where major sensory and motor crossings of white and gray matter occur. So basically, crossings are happening here. Now, brainstem. Your brainstem has reticular formation, yes. Sorry. It also has nuclei. Sorry. Okay, so it also has nuclei, right? Nuclei are basically gray matters which are embedded in the white matter. Remember, and what is reticular formation? It's basically crossing of your gray matter and white matter, which basically breaks down gray matter and white matter into fragments. Now, yes, that's done. Now, moving forward, there's one thing that needs to be clarified before we go forward, which is about your nerves and tracts and everything. So wait, let me just erase this. Yes. So your nerves are basically in your peripheral nervous system. But if the same nerves, the bundles of axons, if they are in the central nervous system, they'll be called tracts, right? So nerves are in peripheral nervous system, tracts are in central nervous system. This is one thing that you should be knowing. Do we have a highlighter? So nerves and tracts. So nerves are in your peripheral nervous system and tracts are in your central nervous system. Now, these are your bundle of axons that we know. And tracts, we've already studied. Remember, cephalocaudally they were going? So these were white matter. So this is white matter. And white matter is always there in central nervous system only. And now, another thing we need to know that tracts are myelinated with the help of oligodendrocytes. These are neuroglial cells, which are supporting cells, and these are only present in the central nervous system. And these help with the myelination. And nerves, because they're in the peripheral nervous system, they're myelinated by the Schwann cells. So this is something that needed to be clarified before we went further.